Okay, guys, I just wanted you to see what the problems look like from last night. So I want to go over each one of these problems with you. For those of you that had trouble, I had some concerns last night, or at least, watching, taking a look at some of your work. So, let's take a look at how to do these problems. First thing I'd want you guys to recognize for problem number 3 is that it's a triangle, right? And a triangle has 3 angles. You're told that the sum of the angle measures is 180 degrees. So you want to write an equation that reflects exactly what the information in the problem gives you. So if you're told that the sum of the angle measures is 180 degrees, we know that we must add, because we see the word sum, and we have 1 angle, 2 angle, 3 angles, right? And the sum has to be 180 degrees. So we write an equation that says that. So we write something like 2 times k, which is 1 angle, plus k, which is the other angle, plus 45 has to be equal to 100, right? 80 degrees. So first things first, we write the equation. And then once we write the equation, we want to combine our like terms. Well, what are like terms? Like terms are terms with the same variable, or like terms can be constants, meaning terms without variables. So we take our 2 times k and our 1k, we have 2k and 1k, we combine those like terms, right? That's going to give us 3k. Recopy the plus 45, right? Recopy the equal sign and recopy the 180. Right? So after you write your original equation, you get to the 2-step equation phase. And I always want to focus the attention of my students on the 2-step equation, right? We see 2 operations. We see addition here, and we see multiplication here. So that's what we mean by a 2-step equation. It has 2 operations. And then from there, we use our inverse operations to solve. So I see addition. The inverse of addition is subtraction, right? But whatever we do on one side of the equation, we have to do on the other side, meaning the equal sign splits the equation into 2 parts, right? This equal sign says that 3 times the number plus 45 is the same as 180, right? So that's what that equal sign tells us, that one side is the same as the other. So we use these properties of equality to help keep that equation true, to keep it balanced. So whatever we do on one side of the equation, we have to do on the other side. So when we subtract 45 on the left side of the equation, that's going to give us 0. We're left with 3 times k on the left side of the equation. And on the right side of the equation, when we subtract 180 and 45, that's going to give us 135. The next step, we see the multiplication. We once again want to use the inverse operation, right? The inverse of multiplication is going to be division. We divide by 3 on both sides of the equation, right? On the left side of the equation, the 3 in the numerator cancels out the 3 in the denominator, right? They're opposite inverse operations, so they give us 1. We write 1k just like that. 1k is going to be equal to 135 divided by 3, that's going to give us 45 for the value of k. We circle or box our answers, right? And we should check our answers, right, to see if that's going to be true, right? So 2 times 45 is 90. So 90 plus 45 gives us a sum of 180. And remember, the properties of equality, we want to be able to see that for every single step. Right? Here's my first step, my properties of equality. I'm using the subtraction property of equality on both sides of the equation. Here's my second step. I have my division property of equality, and I have to see that on both sides of the equation. Okay? Let's look at our next example. Problem 4 from your homework. This problem says that we have the sum of the 4 angles is 360. So similar to the last problem, we want to write an equation that says that. So we start with A, and then we add 2A, plus another A plus another 2A, and we're told that that has to have a sum of 360, right? So we write an equation that reflects or shows what the problem, what the information is given to us, right? And the information says that the sum of the angle measures has to be 360. So first we write our equation. Then we combine our like terms. We have 1A plus 2A plus 1A plus 2A. So 1A and 2A is 3A, plus another 1A is 4A, plus 2A's is 6A's. So we have 6A is equal to 360. We now use our inverse operations. The opposite or inverse of multiplication is division. So we divide by 6 on both sides of the equation, just like the last problem. 6 in the numerator cancels the 6 in the denominator. That becomes 1. I write 1A just like that. 360 divided by 6 is going to be equal to 60. So the measure of A is going to be equal to 60 degrees. All right? Okay. Next problem. Here we get pentagon, right? Pentagon, right? 5-sided figure. But you're told that the sum of the angle measures is 540 degrees. So once again, we want to write an equation that says exactly that. So we start with any of the angles. I'll start with B. Then we add B plus 45. And then we add 90. Then we add another 2B minus 90. And then we add 3/2 B. And that's got to be equal to 540. So once again, we start by writing our equation first. Then we combine our like terms. Like terms are terms with the same variable. So we have 1B plus 1B is 2B's, plus another 2B's is 4B's, plus 1.5 B's. So 4B's plus 1.5 B's, that's going to be 5.5 or 5.5 B. Then we want to combine our constants. So we have 45 plus 90 minus 90. Well, they're opposites, so that's 0. So we're left with the plus 45. And that's got to be equal to 540. So we get to that two-step equation phase because I see my multiplication and I see my addition. So I know I'm going to use my inverse operations. So we're going to subtract 45 from both sides of the equation. That's going to be 0. So we're left with 5.5b is going to be equal to 495, right? When we subtract 45 from 540, we divide both sides of the equation by 5.5, divide by 5.5. On the left side, they cancel. So you're left with 1b. 1b is going to be equal to, well, we got to do a little division, 5.5 into 495, slide to decimal, it goes on our quotient, and this is what, 9? 9 times 5 is 45, put down the 5, carry the 4, 9 times 5 is 45, and 4 is 49, subtract to get 0, bring down the 0, 0's got to go on our quotient, so B is going to be equal to 90 degrees. All right? Okay, next example. Problem 6. Nice basic two-step equation. Subtract 2 from both sides of the equation, right? That's 0. We're left with 10x is going to be equal to 30. And then when we divide by 10 on both sides of the equation, they cancel. X is equal to 3. We check our answer by replacing the variable x with 3. 10 times 3 is 30, plus 2 is 32. That's a nice, simple two-step equation. And most of you didn't have trouble with that last night. I don't think anyone did, actually. But we just want to be careful to show our work nice and neatly. All right? A little bit more trouble here because there's a few places where you can make mistakes. Here's the first place you're going to make a mistake, right? A lot of students see that subtraction, and they immediately want to add. But if you add 19 here, right, that's 19 plus 19. That's not going to be 0, right? We have to recognize that that's a positive 19. And if I want to make that a 0, we have to subtract 19 to make that 0. But if I subtract 19 on one side of the equation, we're going to subtract 19 on the other side of the equation. On the left side of the equation, I'm left with -4 times c. Right? A lot of students forget to bring down that minus sign as a negative sign, right? But we can't forget to do that. That's one place where students are going to make mistakes. Got to bring down that negative sign. 17 take away 19 is -2. When we divide both sides of that equation by -4, they cancel, and we're left with c is equal to negative divided by negative is positive. We simplify 2/4, right? That's going to be positive 1/2. We check that answer. 4 times 1/2 is going to be 2. 19 take away 2 is 17. So we know that that answer is going to be correct, right? Remember, I always want you guys to try to check those answers. Okay, let's look at question 8. Here, we want to recognize like terms because I see that those terms each have the same variable to the same power, right? It's x to the first power, so I want to combine those two terms by adding their coefficients. Coefficient is the number that's multiplying the variable. Well, what's 1.1 plus 1.2? That's going to be 2.3x. Then we have minus 5.4. That's going to be equal to -10. Here we have our two-step equation. I want to do the opposite of the subtraction, which is going to be addition. It's going to make that 0. But if we add 5.4 on one side of the equation, we have to add 5.4 on the other side of the equation. We're left with 2.3x on the left side of the equation. And on the right side of the equation, when we add -10 and 5.4, that's going to be 4.6. We divide both sides of that equation by 2.3, right? They cancel on the left side of the equation. X is going to be equal to 2. All right? Okay. Question 9. All right. Here, once again, we want to recognize our like terms. Like terms are terms with the same variable, so we want to put them together first. Well, what's 2/3? Take away 1/3, right? That's going to be 1/3 h plus 11. That's going to be equal to 8. So that's what your first step should look like, right? Then we want to use our inverse operations. So we're going to subtract 11 from both sides of the equation. On the left side of the equation, they're opposites, so that's going to become 0. We're left with 1/3 h. That's going to be equal to 8 take away 11. That's going to be equal to -3. Now here, in order to get h by itself, we have to get rid of that 1/3 h. So we're going to multiply both sides of that equation by 3. On the left side of the equation, those 3's cancel because you have a 3 in the numerator and a 3 in the denominator. So you're left with 1h is going to be equal to -9, right? Let's check that one real quick. 2/3 of -9 is -6, minus 1/3 of -9 is going to be -3. -6 take away -3. When we add the opposite, that's going to be -3. So if we have -3 plus 11, that is 8, right? So that's going to check, right? Question 10. We want to recognize the distributive property here. When we have a number outside of a parentheses multiplying a sum or a difference in the parentheses. So this 6 is multiplying the difference of 5 and 8 times the number v. All right, so one of the mistakes that I saw people making is not using multiplication. Some students were using addition. No, this is multiplication when we're using the distributive property. So 6 times 5, that's going to be 30, minus 6 times 8, that's 48v. Then we have plus 12, and that's equal to -54. Now here's where I saw too many people making mistakes here. We're not recognizing the like terms. 30 minus 48v, they are not like terms. Like terms have to have the same variable. 30 is a constant. It has no variable. 48v is a term with a variable. They're not like terms. Your like terms are the 30 and the 12. They're your like terms. because those are your constants. Those are your terms without variables. So we want to put them together using addition. 30 and 12 is 42. So we have negative 48v plus the 42, right? The 42 is the 30 and the 12. That's going to be equal to negative 54. And then from there, we have our two-step equation. So we want to use the inverse operations. So we're going to subtract 42 from both sides of the equation. That's going to give us 0. We're left with negative 48v is going to be equal to negative, what's that, 96. We want to divide both sides of the equation by the negative 48. On the left side of the equation, the negative 48 in the numerator cancels the negative 48 in the denominator. So V is going to be equal to, let's see, V is going to be equal to positive 2, right? Because negative divided by negative is positive. 96 divided by 48 is 2. So we get positive 2 for that answer, right? Let's check our work, right? Let's check that. 8 times 2 is 16, right? Because we're going to replace V with 2. 5 minus 16 is negative 11. 6 times negative 11 gives us negative 66 here. Negative 66 plus 12 is negative 54. So you want to check your answers when you can. All right, let's go to question 11. Once again, distributive property. So we want to take that 21 that's outside of the parentheses and multiply that 21 by each of the terms in the parentheses. All right, we talked about in class why I draw those lines, right? We draw the lines to remind ourselves that we're multiplying the 21 by each of the terms in the parentheses. So 21 times 2, that's going to give us 42. 21 times x is 21x. Then we have plus 12x, and then that's going to be equal to 44. It's at this step here where we want to recognize our like terms. Our like terms are the negative 21x and the 12x. They're your like terms because they have the same variable to the same power. Some of you were taking the 42 and putting the 42 with the 21x, right? And that's wrong, right? They're not like terms, right? We have to recognize our like terms. So we take, we recopy the 42, negative 21 plus 12x. That's going to be negative 9x. And then that's equal to 44. From here, we recognize our two-step equation. So I'm going to subtract 42 from both sides of the equation. That's going to be 0. Don't forget to bring that minus sign down as negative 9x. That's going to be equal to, what's that, positive 2? Yes. And then we divide both sides by negative 9. They cancel. And we're left with x is equal to negative 2/9 as our answer. All right? X is equal to negative 2/9. Question 12. Describe and correct the error in solving the equation. Well, let's take a look and see. Oh, this was a tricky one. All right, this was a tricky one because when we use the distributive property, we're distributing a negative here, and we really have to pay attention when we're distributing a negative number. Negative 2 times positive 7 is negative 14. But here, this is where the mistake is. Negative 2 times negative 1y, negative times negative is positive. That should have been positive 2y, which means that that would have been positive 2y. That would have been positive 2y, which means that at this step, positive 6 divided by positive 2 means that our answer should have been positive 3. So that's a tricky one. All right, we got to really be careful anytime we're using a negative number and the distributive property. Negative times negative is positive. All right, a lot of students are going to make mistakes when we're solving equations and we're distributing a negative number. Okay, question 13. The cost C in dollars of making N watches is represented by the equation C is equal to 15N plus 85. How many watches are made when the cost is $385? Well, we have to recognize that C represents the cost in dollars. So that means this $385 has to replace that C. So we rewrite the equation, replacing C with 385, right? So that's going to look something like this, right? We copy the 15N, right? And we copy the 85. And it's here, we have a two-step equation. So I'm going to use the inverse or opposite of addition, which is subtraction. So we're going to have to subtract 85 from both sides of the equation, right? That's going to be 0. This is going to be 300 is equal to 15N. And then we do the inverse of this multiplication, which is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 15. They cancel on the right side. 300 divided by 15, right? And is going to be equal to 20. So how many watches are made when the cost is $385, right? The answer is 20, and those would be watches. All right. Question 14. The height of the house is 26 feet. Okay, so that's the total height. So 26 feet represents the sum, right, of all of that, right? That's got to be 26. What is the height of each story? Well, we want to write an equation that reflects, right, what the information in the problem tells us. And the information says that the height, the total height, is 26 feet. So we know that, change colors, this distance here, which is x, plus this distance here, which is x, plus the 6 feet, right? That's got a total 26. So I want to write an equation that says that. So we write the equation that says x plus 6 has to be equal to 26. We write an equation first before we solve anything, right? And I don't care if you could do the problem in your head. That's not what the directions say. That's not what we're trying to learn. We're trying to learn how to use algebra to represent real life situations, right? And how to use mathematics and algebra to solve that. 1x and 1x is 2x, plus 6 is 26. We have our two-step equation. Subtract 6 from both sides of the equation. That's 0. We're left with 2x is going to be equal to 20. Divide by 2 on both sides of the equation. We get x is equal to 10 feet, right? And that answer should make sense because 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 6 is 26. All right, remember, we're trying to write and solve equations. Okay, last problem for your homework. It says to write and solve an equation to answer the question. The area of the postcard is 24 square inches. What is the width B of the message in inches? Well, what do we know about area? Well, area is equal to the length, right, times the width. And what do we know? Well, we know that, what is it? B plus 3, right, that's our length, times the width, which is 4, has to be equal to 24. There's our equation. This is our length, right? B plus 3, that's our length. This is our width, right? This is L. This is W. We know that area of a rectangle is equal to L times W. So we write an equation that says that. This is our W, this is our L. Use the distributive property. 4 times B plus 12 is equal to 24. We have our two-step equation. We use the inverse operations. So we're going to subtract 12 from both sides of that equation. On the left side of the equation, that's going to be 0. We're left with 4b is equal to 24 take away 12 is 12. We do the inverse of the multiplication, which is division. The 4 on the left cancels the 4 on the right. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So we wind up with b is going to be equal to 3, and those must be inches. All right, so that's our homework for last night. Hopefully the video is going to help you guys out. All right, and good luck.